Today we are going to be talking about medical publishing, and we have two Rowan alumni with us, two Rowan alums who are working in the industry right now. And as always, we are looking to spotlight communication careers that our students might not immediately think of. As we do our conversation today, a couple of reminders. One is that this is being recorded. The Zoom is being recorded. The second is if you do have any questions for our speakers, please put those in the chat. And at our end of the conversation today, we will make sure that we try to get to those. If for some reason we don't get to those, we can also send the questions on to the speakers and hopefully get that question answered for you. So again, I am delighted to welcome two of our own to today's virtual workshop. We have Tanya Kinovich, and she is here with us as a senior medical editor for Blue Print Oncology. And then Ashley Chan, who is assistant editor for Cure at MJH Life Sciences. And so what I would like to do, since a lot of our students are not familiar with medical publishing, and again, we do have a couple classes where we have Intro to Health and Science Communication is joining us. We also have a biomedical art and visualization class. So those students might have a little more of an idea, but I know a lot of our students might not. So Tanya, we'll start with you first. Can you tell us a little bit like what medical publishing is, and then what being a senior medical editor means, and then we'll go to Ashley. And thank you so much for being here again.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so thankful for the invitation. So medical publishing is pretty vast. There's a lot of different components. You could be writing, you could be editing, you could even be a part of client services, medical science, and strategy. So there's a lot of different components and different parts that you can be a part of. So you don't have to be pigeonholed in a specific part or a specific position. So I work for an agency. We work with a lot of large pharmaceutical companies. We create different literature, different pieces for them, whether it's advisory boards, pamphlets. Some things can be promotional, some things can be educational. And my job is to make sure that these things have a level of quality, making sure that names are spelled right, which can happen. Things can be incorrectly spelled, making sure the information is accurate, making sure the sentence structure is accurate and is clear and concise, and also making sure through fact checking that the information is accurate and supported by medical science. So that's a really important part. The last thing you want is information going out there that isn't correct, because a lot of problems can occur if you don't make sure that that's accurate. So that's kind of a very, very small Cliff Note version of what I do on the daily. And I work with various different companies. And the great thing about it is I get to work in a lot of different fields. Even though I do focus a lot on oncology, it's different medications for different types of cancers, different types of treatments. And it's really fascinating what I'm able to do on the daily. So again, that's a very, very succinct explanation of kind of what medical publishing is and what I do specifically.
That's fantastic. And before I forget, I'm not forgetting Ashley, of course. Tanya, can you tell me a little bit when you said that you have to make sure the medical information is accurate? You're not a doctor. You don't have medical training, right? I know you're one of journalism major, one of our best and brightest.
I am, yes.
So how do you learn that? How do you know that? Do you have resources that you reach out to? Because I think a lot of our students might be intimidated by that. Because, and again, not to stereotype, but I know for my own self, like I wasn't a big math and science medical kind of person. I was a humanities and language kind of person. So I might shy away from going into that field, just thinking that I wasn't. And again, we have a lot like our obviously our biomedical art and visualization students are rock stars in that area. But how do you work? How do you do that?
So I was the same. I loved the arts. I loved writing. And I liked science, but math was not my strong point. It really wasn't initially in school. It was something I didn't enjoy. And so there is a level of initial fear when you're going to be dealing with patient numbers, you're going to be dealing with percentages, et cetera. But it's really, you really learn it by doing it, by experience, and that's really the only way you can become effective. And you're right, I'm not a PhD, I'm not an MD, I'm not a PharmD. I've just been doing medical publishing for several years at this point, and you learn by doing, and you learn by asking questions. I think that's the most important thing. No one expects you to know everything out of the gate. I certainly didn't, and everything I've learned is by experience and by doing. So if you have a question, you ask, the writer that created the content. Say, it's okay to ask, hey, I'm not 100% sure about these numbers. How are you getting these? Because I'm not getting them. And maybe they understand something a little bit better and say, oh, well, I'm getting them this way. And yeah, it's a little tricky. And sometimes it's because the number is inaccurate. And that's okay too. The reason why we have a job is because we make sure that these numbers are accurate, because the people creating this content are doing a lot of really extensive high science jobs, and we're there as kind of the fresh eyes to check this information. So yeah, you don't have to go into it and say, oh, well, I know all about oncology. No, you'll learn, and I think that's very important. But it's important to ask questions and not be afraid to ask them, because I think if you have that fear, that's what might hold you back.
That's fantastic. It reminds me of a story real quick that my mother was an administrative assistant when my father was in grad school, and she worked for some sort of agriculture department. I forget, wildlife and fisheries or something like that. But she was typing. If most of you on the call don't remember this, but we used to. Oh, here's like a historical fact. We used to have to hand type things. There were no computers, and you would go through and you would you would look at the person's handwritten document. Like they would hand you sheets of paper with handwriting. And I remember her telling me that there was fruit fly listed everywhere, Frit, fruit fly. And she changed to fruit fly throughout the whole hand typed whatever. And then her supervisor was like, it's fruit.
Dr. Haynes, you're muted.
Oh, I got muted. I think Professor Brager had to mute everyone. Thank you for letting me know that. I was just talking about my mother and her fruit fly. Did you hear the story at all?
Yeah,
Okay.
we
Fruit
heard it
fly
a
versus fruit
bit.
fly.
Part of it, yeah.
All right, if everybody that's not speaking could mute, because I think Karen is trying to mute everyone for the quality of the sound. So if you could look on there and make sure you're muted. All right, Ashley, please let us know what your experience has been like. What do you see as medical publishing, and what do you do?
So I'm a web and print editor, and that means that I write articles for the website for Cure, but I also do print. So that's making magazines for Cure Magazine and Heal Magazine. And those are magazines for patients with cancer and survivors of cancer. And going off of what you said earlier, Dr. Haynes, I was also not a math or science person. So going into this was very different for me, very um I took a leap of faith here because I was like, I wanted to go into book publishing. So that would be like what Penguin Random House and things like that. But this was a different type of publishing that I knew I was going into. And I really just wanted to continue writing. So that's kind of how it ended up here. It's been a different experience for me. Like Tanya has said, learning on the job is very important. I didn't know much about cancer or oncology before this. So a main part of what I do is writing for patients with cancer and educating them on new clinical trials in the space. But I also get to interview patients, survivors, and doctors who can tell me more about what's going on in the space, new things, FDA approvals, and I get to kind of piece those all together in layperson's terms so that it's easy for our audience to understand. And that has been a good experience so far, I would say.
Ashley, if you don't mind, could you let our listeners and students know how you got this job? Because I think it's really a good shout out for our career services, and a little bit
Absolutely.
more about that.
Yes.
And
So
I should mention that Ashley graduated last year, right? So she's on our panel just graduating last year. And she was also an intern for the Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication. We have a special spot in our heart. But yeah, let everybody know how you got the job.
yeah, so for some context, I was a communication studies major with a minor in creative writing. But I actually was going to apply to grad school for an MFA in creative writing. So this is entirely different from where I ended up. So if any seniors are out there in communication studies, you know you have to take senior transition. And one assignment in that class is to go to a career fair at Rowan. Well, it doesn't have to be at Rowan, but I went to that one. And I wasn't thinking of getting a job at all because I applied to grad school. But I walked around and I noticed the company that I work for now at the time there. And I just happened to recognize them because they are close to where I live. And I just started talking to the HR representative. And I was like, hey, I've heard of you before. Can you tell me more about what you do? And she told us that there were many assistant editor positions open. I know some of you are biomedical art majors, and they have some creative content jobs there as well. So I just started talking to her, and we really hit it off, and it was really good. Um, and she told me that she would contact me. So I was like, oh, okay. I didn't really think of getting a job at the time. So I kind of just walked away feeling good about it, knowing that I would have something to go on to afterwards. But I would say if you are a senior or a junior, go to one of those because you never know what you're gonna find there.
I love that story because I know from my own students in communication studies, they're always like, oh my gosh, I have to go to this career fair. Dr. Feaster's making me go, or such and such is making me go, and I don't want to go, and it's not for me. And so I think this is such a wonderful success story of someone who actually found their job at the career fair. Tanya, how did you, if you don't mind, how did you find your job that you're in right now?
Was contacted by human resources from the company, from
Oh, so
Blueprint.
they found you.
They found me,
Okay.
yes. And I had, I was interested in looking for different opportunities. And it was just a great fit. It was a very people-oriented company. And it is a very people-oriented company. And I was so impressed with how they talked about their company. I was so impressed with the people I had met with during the interview process. And I've just been so blessed to be a part of Blueprint Oncology. I've been enjoying it so much. It's such a talented group of people. And yeah, that's another thing I want to mention and kind of seg into is LinkedIn is a really great resource for people who are trying to network, find jobs, etc. People might contact you, you might contact them. It's good to have that relationship, keep in touch with people. Don't just contact them when you need something. Someone doesn't hear from you for 2 years and then go, oh, hey, you have any jobs going on? It doesn't really always look great. You want to just continue following up, saying hello. And because I was somewhat active on LinkedIn, just, connecting with people, Donna was able to find me, from Blueprint Oncology, and that's how our business relationship started. So I think it's really important. And it's also important if someone does contact you and you're not interested in opportunities, just say, you know what, thank you so much for the interest. I'm not looking right now. Be respectful of other people who are following up with you. You might not be interested, but if there's ever a time in the future, 10 years from now or what have you, and some things change, it's always a good idea to have that professional connection and give the courtesy. Thank you so much. I'm not really looking at this time because they're also trying to do their job as well. And so, yeah, but that's how I found this job. And a lot of the other jobs were LinkedIn recruiters as well. That's why I'm saying get involved in LinkedIn, because there's a lot of recruiters that will contact you as you become more invested in your career and you become more experienced about the opportunities that might be available.
And that's such great advice, Tanya. And can you also, we had talked about this earlier about when you go to the interview process, it's not just about you impressing the interviewer, right? But you're also interviewing the company. Could you talk a little bit about that too? And then Ashley, if you want to follow up.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's so important to, I don't want to say interview the company that is interviewing you, but to ask the questions that are important to you. If working remote is important to you, figure out if that's going to be a component. For me, we're an agnostic location, so we don't have an office, so everyone is remote. There are people that work all over the United States. And some of these people, well, most of these people, all of them are some of the most talented people I've ever worked with. And I think that's a thing. I don't want to say there's a positive out of the pandemic because it was an awful situation, but we were able to open our eyes to other people instead of saying, well, they're not in the tri-state area, or we can't hire them because they won't be able to be in the office. Now you're able to hire the best of the best because a lot of companies have the capabilities where you can work from home. Not all companies do, and I'm sure there are a lot of companies where you have to be in the office because of the type of job. But for my job, and Ashley can go more into hers, I can work remote and I can do exactly what I would be doing in the office, but almost more efficiently in my house because I'm more comfortable. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to ask those questions when appropriate. You don't go into a first meeting with a company and go, "So what's your PTO?" It's not, you have to figure out, like, once you're in a certain cycle of the interview process where you can say, "Hey, I also have some questions." One of my favorite questions is, "What do you like about working at X company?" I'm always interested to see. And one of the things that when I had asked the question is, and for Blueprint was, what's your favorite components? Everyone said the people. And when I joined, I realized that that was completely valid because the people were amazing. And it was just really fascinating to me. And there's certain things you can also learn from an interview process that might not be something you're looking for. So it's really important to kind of look for those, I don't want to say those buzzwords, but if you're not looking for long hours off, obviously there's always going to be days where you work late and that's totally fine. But it's always important to see if the things that are important to you are also the things that are important to your company, and making sure that they align as best as possible.
And you're absolutely right. You should not be asking, like, what's the salary? The first question that
No,
they,
no,
do
don't.
you have any questions for us? How much will I be making? That's
Yeah.
probably not appropriate. Do you but you do end up needing to know that. Do you think that most processes for hiring take a couple interviews? I don't know if our students know that either, but a couple of times. So maybe in the second or third, do you think, interview?
Yeah. And yeah, and feel what feels comfortable, like kind of gauge it on who you're talking to. I felt comfortable immediately talking to the Blueprint team. They Donna, again, she works in HR, and she said, if you have any questions whatsoever. And we had a very candid conversation about, the flexible time off, which Blueprint offers, and different benefits and what the work is specifically, like what I'd be doing on the daily. And it was so wonderful for a company to be so transparent. And I think that because sometimes we've had situations where we start a job and it's not what we envisioned, or the different types of things we'd be doing on the daily wasn't really what we ended up getting. There has been no surprises with Blueprint because they were honest from the beginning, and I loved the transparency, and it's so rare to find a company like that. So I've been really enjoying working with them, and I think that's really important, is just kind of figuring out and asking those questions. Well, what do you like about working at X company? And what's the official mission? Also, doesn't hurt to do your research about the company before you interview with them.
Right.
Showing that interest what can put you over when you compare to other people who are trying to get that position. Follow up. If you didn't hear maybe in a week and you're interested, say, hey, I just want to follow up and see if you need anything from me. Whether it's anything, it's just a way to show I'm interested. I want to still be a contender, and it might not always work out, but you never know what'll happen in the future. Maybe it won't work out for that role, but maybe something opens up in a year and they go, we really liked X person. She was really great. Let me contact her. And I've had that happen before in the past where something didn't work out for an initial role and they thought of me like a year or two later and they said, "Hey, you were the first person I thought of because the conversation was pleasant and engaging and everything." So don't be afraid to ask questions when appropriate and just be out there. If you're shut in and you're not engaging, you're just not going to get much out of it.
That's such great advice. I also feel like Blueprint might be getting a lot of calls from Rowan students. People might be like, "Here, take a look at my materials." It sounds like a fantastic place. Ashley, tell us about your experience.
Yeah, so definitely ask questions during the interview. Questions that you can ask include, what is the company culture like? And especially if it's an in-person or hybrid, I'm hybrid, you want to know what kind of people you'd be working with, right? You want to know the age group maybe, because especially now, there are a lot of Gen Z that are starting jobs. And the company culture is used to having millennials be the younger people, but now Gen Z is the younger people. So you want to make sure that you're kind of getting into something you're comfortable with, because my company is pretty young. A lot of people are around, I would say, their upper 20s to 30s. So we're on the younger side, but it makes it more comfortable because you can relate to your teammates and everyone. So I liked that, and knowing that I could be comfortable with them. But also during my interview process, we took personality quizzes that
Hmm.
were really interesting. I wasn't sure what it was for at first, but it's to really find a team that you would mesh well with. Of course, they don't want you working with someone that you would butt heads with every day. It doesn't make for great teamwork all the time. So taking that and really looking back on the team that I've gotten assigned to, I love them. They're the best, and it's great that they are able to do that with the personality test and really match you with the right people.
It's
Um,
like it's like on the job dating or something. It's like a match.com for
yes, yes. That's how I felt when I was taking it. It was kind of funny because I had to do a writing assessment and then that along with the critical thinking test. So it was an interesting mix of quizzes and assessments.
It's interesting that you mentioned that too, because I think some of our students might not realize that companies do that a lot now. Were you intimidated when you had to take these tests? Like, how did you deal with that? I
It's
would have been if I
uh,
had to take a test to come work at Rowan. I would have been a nervous wreck.
yes, that was intimidating to me. The critical thinking one, I looked it up and it's actually a test that lawyers have to take.
Mm-hmm.
So that alone was pretty intimidating, but it's not something to fret about. They just want to see how you would do with coming up with solutions and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
problem solving. But that was interesting. And then the writing assessment was cool because they wanted to gauge what kind of style writing you're comfortable with. I work on a brand that writes for patients. So we write in AP style, which is normal journalism style. But other brands at our company write in AMA style. So that is the medical writing style. But they could tell from my tone that I was more of a patient first type of person. So that's how I ended up on the brand that I'm on. That.
Interesting. Very fascinating. We used to take personality. Do they still do the Myers Briggs? Do y'all even know what that is?
Yes, yeah.
I'm not Gen Z or millennial. Shout out to the Gen Xers on the call. We, we we used to take those like in college and stuff to find out like career readiness, like what kind of field you might want to go into. So there's so many great ways that companies can determine fit now, which is fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about Rowan since you both went to Rowan. And I know some of our students had questions about what classes that you took while you were here that helped prepare you, and or were there classes that you wish you had taken while you were here? Tanya, we'll start with you.
So I know Catherine Quigley's on the call, and any opportunity I had to take a class with her was amazing because she was also my advisor. and we still talk, and it's been many years. um, I I loved news reporting. I know she has some students that don't love news reporting. I liked getting out there. I liked talking to people. It's something out of your comfort zone if you've never done it before, but that's not a bad thing. So I think that's the thing we always need to understand is sometimes the things we need to do to get through our career or get our education might be a little uncomfortable initially because it's something we're not familiar with. But that's okay because we need to break through. Not everything we do in our careers, I think we would all agree are comfortable or are fun. But it's how we get through it and how we learn through it, how we learn about dealing with it and still, having a positive outcome. So I loved news reporting. I loved creative writing. I took a few classes with that. I think two of them. That was great because I like being creative as well. So I really enjoyed that. And I'm trying to think. I actually also loved, I took a class with Professor Cuddy on layout and design, and they were using Quark then. And I love Quark. I'll always love Quark. I'll never change my viewpoint on Quark. And so that was a really great way to kind of learn because even though I've done layout at jobs before, which was really great because we had used at that point Quark. And so I got right into it and I said, oh, I've used this. This is great. And I don't use Quark anymore. I don't use InDesign or anything like that at this point in my career. But it's a really great way to kind of get into a different sect of something and learn a different way. So more of a visual way to report information and have the ability to work and layout and everything like that. So, I mean, I know there's specific classes that they recommend. I couldn't remember the specific list, but I think it's just important to get out there, talk to your advisor about what they suggest. And also, if you have any ideas of what you might want to go into, and this is why we do these kind of workshops, is I knew, and I know Ashley feels the same way, medical publishing, I wouldn't have been able to tell you anything when I was a junior or a senior in college, that was even a component. I thought it was magazines, newspapers. And so, and I didn't really want to do newspapers. And I'm not against newspapers. I think that's vital. Those are vital components for us getting our information. It's just not something I personally wanted to do. So, I think it's important to ask people about those different opportunities in those different fields. And by asking questions to your advisors or to your professors and say, hey, this is something I'm kind of interested in, they can give you ideas of maybe you can go into this and maybe you can go into that. And I think that's so important, is just asking questions. And again, I just getting out there, having a great conversation, having conversations in general with your advisor on what the suggestions are as far as what to take. That's what I did with Professor Quigley, and I think she did the right thing. So those would be my suggestions. Is not, don't be afraid to ask questions about the possibilities, because if you don't ask, you might not get the exposure that you might need.
That's fantastic. I'm having low bandwidth. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, it says low bandwidth. It's sending me a nasty little message. Ashley, go ahead and tell us about your experience.
Sure. So I was a communication studies major, as I mentioned, but I was in the interpersonal and organizational track. So I really loved taking interpersonal communication and all of those classes. But a huge thing, if any of you are communication studies majors, is us reading those studies. And that in general has been really helpful for me in this job because I have to read a lot of clinical studies. And although they are different topics, they are very similar in structure. So that has helped me a lot in understanding where the results are, the discussion section. So classes such as Dr. Coleman's rhetorical criticism, that is a really good class to be, really focus on reading those studies, focus on the conversations you're having because they're going to help you in the future. I know at the time when you're reading them, you're like, why do I have to read this? But it is important and it's very helpful. So classes like that. I also took some creative writing classes. And even though I'm creative and I loved writing in general, it also taught me to write more faster, which I think is something that we kind of struggle with early on. It's like having that writer's block and not knowing what to write about or what to say. But having all those assignments and portfolios has helped me kind of not only have like a collection of writing, but to practice that more because writing is so important in this industry. But yeah, I think looking back, I wish I could take some journalism classes because that's not something I thought I would be interested in, but it's something that feels right to me now. So looking back, I would take a couple journalism classes.
All right. So Dr. Haynes is having a few issues and is a little frozen. But
Frozen.
once she gets back, are you there? Okay, so I'm gonna take the next question. Both Ashley and Tanya, can you tell us a little bit just kind of about your day to day? Like, what does it look like in terms of tasks and communication with, especially in this virtual world that that so many are living virtual slash hybrid. What are those day to day tasks like? What kind of is your get up in the morning and what happens from there in terms of your work duties?
Sure.
I think, am I back before you answer, Tanya? Am I back? I'm so sorry. I don't know what's happening. I hate Zoom. Definitely. Thank you. So, Professor Brager is the program assistant.
Thank you. I Ashley, do you want to go first?
Okay, yeah. Oh, okay. So my day to day as an assistant editor. So since I am on web and print, I start off my morning by really focusing on social media, and we use Hootsuite, so it makes it so much easier to plan out the day and schedule all of those social media posts going on Facebook, Twitter, or X, whatever it's called now. So that's kind of how I start off my day, just scheduling all of those out. And what we do is we post articles from the previous day on our website so that any of our viewers on there could click on that and go back to our site. We also do contributors, which are patients or survivors with cancer who write for our website and talk about their experiences. So I do some editing there. And that's kind of how I start off my morning before our huddle, which is every single day. And it's kind of a small meeting with my team talking about our priorities for the day. And after that, I'll move on to a different task, which would likely be writing something. So I either have like interviews set up with doctors or patients, and then I write it afterwards. Or we do something called quick hits, where we find a press release and we write off of that. So those become my two articles for the day. If I'm in Printland, as we call it, I'm focusing on a magazine where I will be working with our graphic designer on the layouts for our magazine in InCopy and InDesign, for any of you familiar with those. And what we do there is I have to read what she has pasted onto the magazine and kind of go in and copy edit, and make sure it looks good. So that is mostly what I do day to day. But because I'm an assistant editor, I do have to help out with other administrative tasks as well.
For those administrative tasks, I remember doing that grunt work. So I guess for me, for the daily, the cool thing is it varies, and I'm sure there's a lot of variation with Ashley as well. But if I had to kind of put it through a succinct, way, we do have a couple meetings during the week to kind of talk about what we're expecting, what the flow of the week is going to be. We use a project management system called Workfront And that way we can see what's coming in, what days they're coming in, how long the job is as far as deadlines. Those programs are also where you upload, where things live on SharePoint. So then you can access it, save your files, everything. As far as the work, it can be very varied, and because you work on a lot of different clients. So you might be working on an advisory board one day, you might be working in Proof HQ, working on a pamphlet for another day. You might be doing a bunch of things in one day, which is great because it really kind of keeps you varied, and it keeps you very engaged because you're able to kind of do something a little different here and a little different here. So that's really enjoyable. I'm also working on a lot of trainings at my job currently to kind of streamline some processes, get my team over to AMA 11, tweak some fact checking processes and everything like that. And I've been loving that because the team is so engaged and they want to make things better. And that's always so refreshing. I think a lot of companies say, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if there's a better way or a cleaner way or a more concise way you can do something, why not entertain it? Maybe you don't use it in the end, but it's always good to just educate yourself on possibilities. And so I've been really enjoying that in my job as well. And I'm always willing to do something a little different than my daily because, again, it allows me to do project management or things like that. So, and again, like I could be doing a fact check job. I have references. I need to make sure the annotations are accurate. If the annotations aren't, I have to cite that or maybe make some suggestions. So that's kind of my daily as far as the things that I get to do. And again, grammar, misspellings, making sure sentence structure is accurate, making suggestions if I'm not 100% sure they want it changed. Because also, remember, again, we're not medical, we don't have medical degrees, so we might want to change the structure, but it might change the meaning, and that's what you don't want. So sometimes I'll just say, this is a little unclear. I suggest X example, and then sometimes, most of the time, they go, oh yeah, that's more clear, let's use that instead. Because we can't always assume that we understand every single thing, because again, we don't have those higher level degrees, but we do understand. It's about taking that information and making it as clear as possible and just providing suggestions as needed. Usually the information is great as is, but if we can make it a little cleaner, that's great. So that's kind of what I do on the daily. But again, it's so varied, which is why I really like it, because it keeps me busy and it keeps me engaged in a lot of things at the same time.
It's really helpful for our students to know. Can you talk a little bit about AI? I am living in AI hell. I'm not going to lie because my students are using AI and I don't want them to use AI, but I know some people love AI. So if you could speak about that, that'd be great.
Well, actually, it's very interesting you mentioned that, and I can't talk a lot about it because I haven't used it that much, but we just had a retreat with my company a few weeks ago and we had talked about AI. AI is a really good stepping stone for visualization of different ways to show different cells or different mechanisms of action. And sometimes they can give you a good starting point for creative, where they can create something based on that thought. So it's kind of that starting point. And they go, oh, okay, I kind of have an idea now. And then they can create something that's, not the AI version, but something that's just so much more beautiful and everything. I personally haven't used AI that much in my role. I'm sure, Ashley will have her experiences, but I think AI is good if used in the correct way. If it's a good way to kind of spur a different thought or a different illustration or a different view to kind of get those creative juices flowing, I think that's great. When people use it as a way to say, well, I created this. I don't know. I think there's a lot of, I think as AI becomes more and more popular, I think the discussions will become more and more in depth. And I think that's starting. And again, I don't want to talk about something that I don't really know enough about. But I am seeing it become, I mean, if you even log on Facebook, there's AI images all the time where they're so perfect that you almost have to wonder, is this real or not? And you actually have to start researching and go, are those celebrities actually dating or things like that, because they're so well done. And that's a little scary in a lot of ways, but it's about utilizing it in an appropriate way versus a hurtful way. And I think if we do that, that's when we can have a positive outcome.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Tanya. I think AI needs to be used in the right way. And my company actually focuses on using ChatGPT, but not in a way that for it to take our jobs, right? We want it to be used responsibly. And a way that we do that is to really, if we get stuck and we have writer's block, to kind of prompt it to tell us like what other topics or aspects we could include. We have to write publisher's notes sometimes for our magazines. And when we are running for ideas on that, we'll tell ChatGPT, like, give us an idea on how to write a publisher's note for XYZ. And it's not to be used right from there. It's to give us an idea. And that makes processes a lot faster, I would say, because instead of sitting there in front of your computer for 20 minutes trying to figure it out, you can make this happen in about 5 minutes. So it's really about using it as a tool and not making it take our jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really
That's great advice. It is so fast. So I have been like, I had an exam in a class and I knew it what didn't sound like a student. And so I went on Chat GPT and I put it in, put the exam question in, and I don't think it was even a second. I mean, I sound like such an old person. Like it's technology, but it was literally like a millisecond and there was the answer. So in terms of using as a prompt, I think it sounds great. Ashley, you mentioned writer's block, and I know our students had questions about that, about some of the strategies you use to help with writer's block. And can you explain those or some of the things that you might use in addition so AI is a good way to use it? What else do you do? And then Tanya.
Sure. So, yeah, early on in your career, you're gonna get writer's block. It's a little bit inevitable and it's very annoying because sometimes I sit there and I'm like, really, I can't write. But something that I think of is, okay, I'm writing something based off of either an interview or a study. So what I do is if I'm writing off of a study, I'll go back to the discussion or the results and really highlight the important information there. And once I have that, it makes writing so much easier because I know exactly what I'm writing, exactly what I should be highlighting in my article. But if I'm writing based off of an interview, I'll go back to the transcript, which is used with AI. And we kind of just go back and read some of the important information or topics that either a doctor or a patient talked about and how you want that to structure your article. Instead of writing right off the bat, if you're a little bit stuck on writing, I would say create an outline. It really helps. It doesn't have to be formal with every single detail, but at least, something, for instance, I would be like, all right, next I'm going to talk about side effects. So I want to put side effects here. I want to include a quote from a doctor here. So that helps me write faster and it will definitely help you too, I'm sure.
Tanya, how about you?
Chat GPT that much at this point. I think we're starting to get into it a lot more. I think it is a great resource, but I think we always need to remember to not take things that are AI or from Chat GPT or various other programs as completely factual. We
Perfect.
always need to do our due diligence to make sure that information is indeed accurate, because we can create a big problem if we say, okay, this is what it is, plunk it in something, and then all of a sudden, an illustration is not accurate, or the data are not correct. And so while, again, I think it's a great stepping stone, I think it's great for writer's block, I think it's great to start that start that is like that good first step into maybe creating something that you're having a little trouble with, or you want to kind of get again some stepping your first stepping stone or your jumping point, but you can't depend on it. And I think that's a thing that we have to be careful about, because these programs can be wrong, and
That's
they are
such
wrong.
great advice. Sorry,
Yeah.
Tanya.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, I think it's great to use it in the appropriate way, but I think, and I know there are probably companies or blogs out there that just use Chat GBT as, they're just source, and they just, plunk it on there. And I don't know any off the top of my head, but I have to imagine they're out there. You can tell, I'm sure if Ashley writes something and she compares it to a Chat GPT, there's just a difference. And that's
There
why
is.
we still need the jobs, because you need that human touch. So again, using it as a stepping stone and using it as a tool, but if you're using it as a crutch, I think that's where you have a problem.
Yeah, it's such important points, Tanya, both of you, because I was talking about seeing these tests, and you just know a human didn't write it. It just doesn't sound like a student wrote it on the exams that I was grading, and then they're also wrong.
Yeah.
I feel bad, but it's like, no, that's not the right answer, and also you're a computer. Um, so, um, Professor Sarah Jarrett is on the call with us. She brought her biomedical art and visualization class. I know she has years of experience working in medical publishing, so we're thrilled to also have her be here with us. She had a question. I know you were talking about medical illustrators just a second ago, Tanya, and I know, Ashley, you were talking about graphic designers. Do you work with other visual artists at your job, like scientific or medical illustrators? And then the second question Sarah had related to that was, if you do work with them, are they in-house, or do you contract work for those?
So at the company I'm at currently, we have a creative team, and they create so many things, from illustrations related to mechanisms of action to how a different campaign is going to look, the colors that are appropriate for the brand. The things they create blow my mind, because while I like being creative, the hours that they spend to tweak these things and create just some of the most visually pleasing pieces. Every component is important. No one is more important than anything else. Creative is just as important as editorial. It's just as important as client services, and is just as important as medical science and strategy, which are often the people creating the content. Is just as important as you know, human like everyone is so important in that cog, everyone is a part of that cog. And so sometimes I think editorial services kind of gets forgotten, and creative kind of gets forgotten. And they're such important parts, because if it's not visually aesthetic and it's not going to engage the user, you're not going to get that impact. You're not going to get that effect. Just as if the information is wrong or the information is misspelled, you're going to also have a problem with engaging the population you're trying to reach. So I'm so fortunate to work with such a creative team that it's so talented, and the things they've created for pitches to win business, it blows me away, and I say I couldn't do it. And we have a team in house, and they do an amazing job.
That's great. Ashley, what about you in your company?
Yeah, so I work with a senior art director on the magazines, and she works with me on the cover of the magazines, which is my favorite part of the whole process. Yeah, it's amazing. So I'll be writing either the feature or the overall theme of the magazine, but I go to her and I talk about what kind of design I'm looking for. So for instance, my first magazine was for Heal, the one for survivors. And the feature in it I didn't write, but it was from a freelancer, and it was about financial toxicity of the cost of cancer drugs. So how expensive it is. And for that, I had a vision of it just being full of like dollar bills all over the cover on top of, the word toxicity. And she knew exactly what I was talking about and just created this really beautiful cover of it. I wish I could show you, but it's just she made it kind of like cartoonish, but in a way that it emphasized exactly what the theme of the feature would be. So that's my favorite part. I love working with them. But yes, they are in-house. I personally don't get to work with other scientific or medical illustrators, but I know other brands at our company do. And they focus more on either web or print as well, but they really do come with amazing artwork, and it's always so fascinating to see what they can do, as Tanya said.
It really is phenomenal. I mean, if you're at Rowan and you haven't checked out some of the biomedical art and visualization students' work, I know they have exhibits sometimes. It's phenomenal. And you talk about AI, it looks like an actual heart, or the infographics that they make, or I have a son who wants to go into game media design, and I know they do that a lot in BMAV too, where they're, this is how a journey through the heart or something like that. So that's fantastic. So your companies have in-house people that are doing that. That's fantastic. Um, if you have any questions for us, we have time for probably a couple more. If you want to go ahead and put those in the chat for us. While we're waiting for any other questions in the chat, I did want to ask you about your role as since we are the Center for the Advancement of Women in Communication, about your role as a woman in the field. Have you found that it is medical publishing is a more male-dominated field? Have you not found it to be what have been your experiences with that? Ashley, we'll go ahead and start with you first, and then Tanya.
Sure. So actually a lot of people in editorial are female, we're women, and that has been really comforting. I didn't know that going in, but it's cool to see that we are really making an impact here in this industry. And um, even though internally it's great, externally you're going to be talking with a lot of different people from different companies, different doctors, and it could be hard sometimes because, especially me, because I'm early on in my career, they know that they're going to be like, you're young, and so it's important to have that confidence as a woman in this industry because you want to stand up for yourself. And as Tanya has been talking about, you really want to fact check your writing and every piece of content you're putting out there. So you want to be confident, but you want to make sure that you can back yourself up with evidence to be like, no, I'm correct. Please respect me.
And Tanya, you were also the editor of the Wit when you were at Rowan too. So I don't know if you want to talk about your experiences with being the editor in chief, if that had an impact too. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I love being a leader. I love working with people, and the time I was on the Wit were some of the best years of my life, and that's the truth. And um, just the late nights laying out on Wednesdays and the laughs we had, the breaking news stories we would have. There was a situation where there was a meningitis outbreak. Not an outbreak, but there was a concern for an outbreak because someone got very sick. They thankfully got through it, but that broke on a Wednesday, and so we had to figure out, oh my gosh, that has to be on the front page. And yeah, I think it's just continuing to get out there, continuing to network, and always knowing that you might be doing a great job, but what can you do to even learn more? I try to learn something new every day and say, what can I do different that, today that I didn't do yet yesterday? When I was in my early 20s, I thought I knew everything. And I can tell you now, creeping on 40, um, I don't know anything because every day is a surprise. Yes, I know things, but I don't want to assume that I know everything because I don't. And it's really refreshing to just be so open to learning and want to become better every day. So I think that's really an important thing. And that was something that I learned at the Wit, and it was just so enjoyable. And as far as women in the workplace, Yeah, I've been so impressed that there are so many women. I've worked with a lot of female editors. There's a lot of women working at my company right now. A lot of them are in leadership roles, and it's refreshing to see. And my company is extremely engaging in making everyone feel comfortable, making everyone feel heard. I think that's a really important thing for any company. It doesn't even have to be medical publishing. And I think we need to remember that we need to be respectful, and like Ashley said, we need to have the confidence, but we also need to back up that confidence with fact-based information. So if we're just coming in thinking, we're running the roost, but we don't have the experience to back it up, that can kind of blow up in our faces a little bit. So we have to make sure that we take the steps to learn too. Sometimes that involves asking questions, or doing research after hours, or looking into something maybe not on company time, so you understand something a little better. I've done that many times. I not related to medical publishing, but I used to be in the death care profession for 4.5 years, and I still freelance after hours. And one of the things when I started that in that industry, I asked for the embalming book so I could read it after hours, because I wanted to know how to report something that was so sensitive and very science based, which I think is why I got into medical, because I really loved that component of it. So I think it's just important to educate yourself, ask questions, because I just always say, never assume. Don't assume. Anytime I ever assume, it never ends well. So ask the questions, get the information, back up your confidence with actual information as to why you feel confident, because um, you want to be able to say something and know that that is accurate. And it's okay not to know something. That's another thing. You're not going to know everything in the world. I think it's important to just ask the questions and say, like, I'm not 100% sure about this, but you know what, I can find out. That's an acceptable answer too.
Such great advice. It really is. It reminds me, there's a joke in academia that says when you get your undergraduate degree, like your BA or your BS, you think you know everything. And then when you get your master's, you realize you know nothing. And when you get
Yep.
your PhD, you realize you know nothing, but no one else does either. So it's okay. Oh, but it is, I love that advice from both of you about being confident, but also being willing to say, I don't know, and doing the extra work to find out. So I think that's really great advice. We do have a couple of questions in the chat that are really interesting. Um, One of the questions is, have either of your publications done articles on the recent breakthroughs with sickle cell anemia? It's an interesting question. Do you know?
I don't think we have, only because we kind of focus on the
Right on
oncology.
oncology.
But I have been reading some of those advancements, and I'm very, very excited to see what's to come personally.
Yeah, and I forgot that your focus is just on oncology. Ashley, how about in MJH Sciences?
Yeah, so personally too, my role is within the oncology space, but
Right.
we have other brands that work with sickle cell anemia, so they have been reporting on that as well.
And another question we have is, how do you navigate ethical, another thing's joined and I lost my place. How do you navigate? Here we go. How do you navigate ethical considerations when editing medical content, especially in sensitive areas like oncology where you both work?
That's a good one. I think it's just really important to be thorough in what you're editing, and be as appropriate as possible, and be respectful. One of the things that AMA 11 recently started, uh, well, it was released in 2020, but using they as a singular pronoun. This is a really good thing, because it continues to hold up the anonymity of patients in trials, instead of saying he versus she. Because if there's if there's one woman in a trial and you say she, then you really kind of know who it is. And so it's really important to use they. Another thing, which is something that I didn't even think of until a few weeks ago, was it's appropriate for people who are non-binary. And I think that's really important, is to respect people and their lifestyles of what they decide. And so if by using they, if we have an advisor or someone that we're covering in a slide deck or something who lives non-binary, we can create that respectful environment for them. I think it's important if you have questions and you're editing content and you're a little nervous about any ethical ramifications or anything, talk to your supervisor, do some research, and again, don't assume. I really try not to assume, especially in those things where something that you change can be hurtful to a group. And I think that those are the most important things. You might not know the answer initially. I would be lying if I said I know the answer to every, ethical question. That's, I mean, we have ideas of what avenues, but we might not know specifics, especially if we don't deal with it on a daily basis. So I think the most important thing is to clue in your supervisor, ask them, so the most appropriate way, or clue in the person who's writing the content. I don't create the content, I edit it. So the writer might have a better answer for me as far as, hey, can I, get some insight on why you wrote it this way, and are we going to have any ramifications if it's like this? And you'll be able to get that information, not only for that instance, but for the future. So I think it's just always important to put yourself also into that situation to make sure that you're being as respectful as possible.
Fantastic. We have time for one more question. Oh, I'm sorry, Ashley. Did you want? I'm
Sure, I'll
cutting
add on.
Ashley off.
Yeah, this is a really great question. I will add on. So when you're writing in sensitive areas, just like about cancer, it's really important that you don't change the meaning of things, as Tanya said earlier, because if you change the meaning, you're misleading people. But you do want to make sure that you're also referencing any studies or really your references there, because you don't want to make it sound like you're saying this information, especially knowing that we are not doctors or anyone certified to be talking about these topics like that. So that is something that helps with navigating that, I would say.
I agree with
And
that.
I will start with you, Ashley, on this last question. And you do patient advocacy. So it says, do you ever run into issues regarding patient advocacy when editing? And you do a lot of that, right, Ashley?
Yeah, so I do work with patients and patient advocates. I haven't personally run into any issues, but I will say that some people really do want certain things emphasized in the story or the article that I'm writing. So it has to do with a lot of negotiation and compromise and showing them what you've come up with, but also when they review it to be like, oh, well, I kind of wanted you to emphasize this a little bit more. And it's up to you as the writer or the editor to be like, yes, this is an important point that you're making and it's important for our audience to read. So at the end of the day, it's more so about what your audience sees, and how you navigate that.
Tanya, thanks, Ashley.
I deal with more HCP, which is healthcare professional pieces versus patient and patient advocacy, but I have done some patient pieces in the past, and I've had some accounts that have focused on patient pieces. And I think what Ashley said was 100% accurate. You have to be respectful, have those conversations, and understand that what you're creating and what you're reporting affects the quality of life and the education that these patients need. And if you're unclear, it can affect how they feel. They could feel disillusioned. They could feel misled. And so I think that's so important, is to talk to people who are more if you're not as well versed, talking to people who are. And I don't want to say put your shoes in the situation, but maybe a little bit. Yeah, I think it's really important to be respectful of what some of these patients are going through. I've dealt with accounts for specific disease states that, while the drugs did help in creating a better quality of life, did not fix the issue forever. So you need to be very respectful of those situations where eventually things will change for the negative, but it's creating better quality of life for the years that they do have. And so I take that very seriously, and anyone creating those patient pieces should. And I know Ashley does. So while I don't do that as much anymore, I'm always thinking of that in the back of my head. Even if I'm not doing a patient forward piece, it's something I'm always thinking about, because I think all of us know a loved one or a friend or ourselves that have been affected by an oncology based situation. I know I have, and or a debilitating illness or something like that. And it's always so important to be respectful and getting that information, talking to the right people so we can be.
Thank you so much, Ashley and Tanya, for being here with us today. We are so proud of you as Rowan alums. And we definitely want to thank your employers too, Blueprint Oncology and MJ Life Sciences, for allowing you to also speak with us. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Professor Miles Coleman and Professor Sarah Jarrett for bringing their classes today, and our students. We hope that it was valuable to you and interesting to you, and that you can see in both Tanya and Ashley some wonderful possibilities for your future. So I know some of you are in class and you need to get going, but thank you for everyone who's attended, and we wish you the best. Check out
Oh,
our
if I could say one more thing.
oh, yeah, sure, Tanya.
Oh, I just want to say, for anyone on the call, if you're looking to get into the field or anything and you have any questions, I'm on LinkedIn. So feel free to, if you want to message me with any questions. I've been through what you're going to be going through. And if I can assist you in any way and give you some guidance, I'm happy to do that.
That's
Thank you so
that's
much.
that's wonderful generosity on your part, and certainly one of the things we pride ourselves on these networking opportunities that we provide for everyone. So everyone, go have a great day. We appreciate you coming, and we'll see you at our next virtual workshop. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.